Hi, my name is Travis Lindsay. I'm here for Cal State Fullerton's Center for Entrepreneurship. And here today, I have Tim Shaw. He is, let me get this correct. You are the leader of government and public sector engagements for RevHub. And we've recently partnered with them to help expand the entrepreneurial community in Southern California, and thought it'd be a good idea to sit down with him and help you guys get to know him a little bit better. So Tim, can you please introduce yourself?
You bet. Thanks, Travis. Happy to be here. So I'm one of the founding partners of RevHub, Orange County, social enterprise incubator. We also have a fund that is Rev Fund, investing in the enterprises that emerge from our incubator, but we'll also invest in those that we haven't incubated if they're good deals, but they have to be social enterprises. So this is all about creating an ecosystem in Orange County that supports for-profit businesses that are addressing, our world's greatest challenges, environmental and social challenges at scale. So I started my career way back in the day in nonprofit work, which kind of drove me into social enterprise because I kind of got sick of the philanthropic hamster wheel, the unsustainable business model in a nonprofit and the lofty expectations of what nonprofits are supposed to be able to solve without any scale and without a good business model. And that really is what led me to social entrepreneurship and social enterprise. So outside of RevHub, I did a lot of stuff, but that's pretty much in terms of our partnership with Cal State Fullerton. We're really proud to be partnered as RevHub with the Center for Entrepreneurship there.
Yeah, so there was something that you hit on there that I think we should delve a little bit deeper into, and that's the idea that social entrepreneurship, it could be a for-profit business. I think that for a lot of people, even some people who are watching this think that social entrepreneurship, it must necessarily be nonprofit, and that shouldn't be part of it. That's not really the case, right? So can you maybe give a couple of examples of what would be a good social enterprise?
Yeah, so let me first, because what you said is really important, right? There's this notion in our society that if you think you have an innovation that can better address a social and environmental problem, you're told, oh, well, then go start a nonprofit organization, right? That's the province of nonprofit organizations. The problem with nonprofits and the philanthropic sector is that they lack scale, and they lack the ability to scale quickly. And they also are at the whims of whatever the donor interest is, right? It's not about big sort of systems change, that kind of thing. Now, they're great at alleviating suffering on the community level and dealing with community problems on a community level, but not at scaling. And then you have the government sector where people think, well, that's the government's job to do that. Well, the problem with government, while government can be innovative, it can be creative, and it can scale, it gets mired in politics and bureaucracy, right? And we've all just sort of bought into the notion that private enterprise, private capital doesn't have a responsibility to solve the most pressing environmental and social issues of our day. And I think if we triangulate around that with all of those sectors really bringing to bear what they do best, that's going to give us our best chance at solving these. So you look at so you ask for examples, our focus at RevHub is really in two areas of social enterprise. So for-profit businesses with a social mission at their center. And that's in the areas of climate action and health and human equity. So we have in our portfolio of companies, companies like EcoDrive, where they are a carbon mitigation company that is planting mangrove trees, which have been shown to be more beneficial than just about any other plant species in terms of removing carbon from the atmosphere. And they're dying all over the place. So this is not just sort of a reforestation play. It also works with corporate folks in industry that want to offset their carbon footprint by planting mangroves. And it also provides jobs in the local communities where these mangroves are planted. So that's a good example of a social enterprise. There's a business model there that is scalable. It's addressing something at scale, and it has ancillary benefits of providing jobs and income and economic growth for regions.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's part of the ecosystem, right? I mean, so it's about building out all the different parts of the ecosystem, because as each individual component of it gets stronger, then the whole ecosystem overall gets stronger. It's kind of, we're greater than the sum of our parts, right? And
Yeah.
so that brings me into the next topic, which is the partnership that you have through RevHub OC with Cal State Fullerton. I know North Orange County Community College District, and a number of other organizations. Can you give a brief overview of that, and what the overall mission is with our grant?
Sure. So we believe, and the reason we started here in Orange County, RevHub, is we believe that all of the raw materials exist here to build a thriving social enterprise ecosystem, right? They're all here. We've got two amazing public universities in Cal State Fullerton and UC Irvine. We've got Chapman University. We have this amazing community college, system here. We have, excellent companies, high-tech companies. So we don't lack innovation and that kind of stuff here, right? So we have every raw material necessary. We just don't have the resources to build that kind of ecosystem yet. The United States is really behind the rest of the world in terms of public support of social enterprise ecosystems and social impact investing and those types of things. Other countries have gone way farther than we have. You look at a place like California, we should be the hotbed of social enterprise, and Orange County should be leading that way, right? But a while back, I actually presented that problem to State Senator Josh Newman, and I basically told him about a program in Canada. The government of Canada has a social impact, social finance program that they piloted to fund organizations kind of like RevHub and others like the Center for Entrepreneurship, social enterprise, ecosystem builders, and social impact investment fund infrastructure all over Canada. It was so successful that now they have a $700 million annual program. So I told Senator Newman, our economy in California is bigger than Canada's, and we're doing zero in that regard. And so, hey, I bet we could, with the resources in Orange County, build a pretty good pilot program that could demonstrate concept around building a social enterprise ecosystem, but we need some funding. And Josh, to his great credit, the senator went and got us an $8.5 million state budget appropriation in the last budget cycle. And so we put a collaborative together that includes the Center for Entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton. And I'm really proud of the non-traditional partners that we have brought in, because obviously on something like this, you would think the Center for Entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton would be a partner, right? You probably would think that the North Orange County Community College District would be a partner. There are others that, though, you may not think of as a partner. One example is the multi-ethnic collaborative of community agencies. Well, why would they be a partner? They don't even have any entrepreneurship programming, right? They're a collaborative of organizations that serve the Cambodian community, the Chinese community, the Vietnamese community, other communities here. Well, they're embedded in those communities. And so when we are needing to outreach and engagement to get more people interested in entrepreneurship, and particularly social entrepreneurship, we need to partner with these trusted organizations in different communities. And so this $8.5 million went to form what we call the NorthSTAR Systems to Access Resources, NorthSTAR OC Collaborative. So groups like I mentioned, MECA, Cielo, others doing outreach and engagement, the Orange County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and their Small Business Development Center is part of the collaborative. And we have two strategic aims. One is to build the social enterprise ecosystem, starting in North Orange County, but then eventually in all of Orange County. And the second is to create illuminated pathways to entrepreneurship for underrepresented and under-resourced entrepreneurs, because we know that both are needed. We can't set up another system that is going to be destined for inequities, right? I mean, in business finance, it's probably the most inequitable system left in the United States, when only 2% of all the venture capital last year went to women-owned businesses. That's ridiculous, right? So we wanted to make sure that whatever we were setting up, if we were investing resources, we were creating pathways for everybody, right? To start building belief that entrepreneurship could be a viable alternative for them, and then giving them all of the mentorship and non-dilutive funding and whatever they need from the earliest stages of exploration, ideation, incubation, and then eventually, hopefully, we'll spin out a bunch of wonderful social enterprises that Rev Fund can invest in.
Yeah, 100%. And what you were saying about California being, it's what, like the fifth or seventh largest economy in the world, and it didn't have anything like this from before. I mean, there's been pent up demand for it for a while. I mean, I remember back when I was teaching entrepreneurship there in 2019, 2020, tumultuous time because of COVID and whatnot. But most of the students that came up with business ideas in my classroom, they had some sort of a social component to them, and they weren't sure about how to go about it. What should they do? And so what I see with our partnership and building out this ecosystem is that it's going to really help people understand and figure out the right way to actually build those types of social enterprises. And so that I know that's a big part of what we're doing and our contribution to this ecosystem. And I'm 99% sure that that's going to be helpful to everybody else in the ecosystem as well, right? So that's really a big part of it, right? It's just helping people figure out how to actually build these businesses, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard enough to, anybody who's been involved in entrepreneurship. I mean, no matter what kind of business you're starting, be the best idea in the world, it's hard. And it is just, failure is just part of the deal, right? And there are a lot of good reasons for a business to fail, a lot. Like some you hope will come in early enough to where, you can fail fast and move on to your next thing or pivot or whatever. But there are really horrible reasons for businesses to fail. For instance, I needed $700. I'm a single parent. I'm trying to build my business. I think I've got this really great idea. I need $750 for a software license, or something. I can't afford it, and I can't. So that's a bad reason for a business to fail, right? And so if we really want to provide pathways of opportunity to underrepresented, under-resourced communities, then we have to provide right fit capital and this mentoring and coaching and belief building, throughout the process, because those folks don't have access to friends and family, money that most of us, most business owners who start their business, that's the first place they go. We all know that, right? So we need to sort of recreate that kind of community, for people. And that's what the NorthSTAR OC collaborative is really doing.
Yeah, it's I know it's been said a lot in the past, but like a rising tide lifts all boats. But if you don't know how to build a boat, you're kind of left out, and you might, So 100%. And that's kind of how I see what we're doing is that we're helping people figure out how to build boats, and then benefit themselves, but then also the rest of their community. So taking a slight turn, I wasn't going to talk about this, and even though we talked about it before, I think I should bring it up. But you were talking about entrepreneurs and not having the resources that they need to really figure it out. I noticed in the background your artwork. We talked about this a little bit already, but it's Jeff Pascal, one of our Cal State Fullerton alumni. And I think I'm not going to take credit for it at all, by no means at all, but he was one of our students and a member of our incubator, and kind of a proto member of this ecosystem. He created the art that you see in the background of Spider-Man, and he does a lot of this stuff. So I think that's kind of one little nugget of success that we can point to, and I think you'd probably agree. I mean, it's not us that's responsible for this success. It's the entrepreneur that deserves all the credit, but still, I mean, it helps.
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to talk about is, values are important, right? And I noticed that on the RevHubOC website, I mean, you guys prominently display it, impact, entrepreneurship, responsibility, and empowerment. I mean, I think that everything that you've said up to this point, goes to each of those individual components of your value system. Is there anything else that you want to say about that and how that plays a role in social entrepreneurship overall?
One thing that I would say, like those values kind of speak for themselves. But one thing that I think is important for an organization like RevHub is, and it's great to talk to you because you're an example of this. We've built RevHub on partnerships, right? How does that relate to those values? Well, you're not, and what we were just talking about, right? You're not going to be, we are in no way, shape, or form can RevHub provide everything from soup to nuts that every entrepreneur in all their unique circumstances is going to need, right? It does take a village, right? And we have to, and we can't build all of that stuff in-house. So we really, when we started building RevHub, we've said, I actually said it in a meeting this morning, right? We approach the work humbly is one thing that we always say, right? Because that humility allows us to look at the landscape and go, you know what? This is not being met, but we don't know anything about it, right? And so what we need to do is probably partner, like, would I have an impact showing up, you know, into an underrepresented community that I didn't emerge from, you know, saying I'm here to help you with your entrepreneurial ideas? Or is it better for us to partner with organizations and people that are already embedded in those communities and trusted, right? To sort of build capacity in those communities. So partnership is just underlines everything that we do, and unique partnerships like the collaborative we pulled together. But one thing recently that we started in partnership with UC Irvine is a climate action business incubator. So Orange County doesn't have one. And so we partnered with UCI and a group called Sustain SoCal, which is an incredible convening educational organization, advocacy organization around building more of an economically sustainable future. We've partnered together now to build a climate action business incubator, and we've gotten incredible support. We won a Small Business Administration Growth Accelerator Fund competition award for it. We've gotten some funding locally from groups like the Samueli Foundation and others. And so thinking about what those, you know, what those needs are in the community, and then partnering with others to meet them, not coming in like we can do the whole thing. We need to partner with Cal State Fullerton, the North Orange County Community College. So partnerships is how this whole thing is going to work. That's the ecosystem build, as opposed to just everything being about RevHub all the time.
Yeah, 100%. And when we say ecosystem, I mean, it's not just a buzzword. It's literal and in kind of the biological sense of the term. I mean, if something were to happen in the ecosystem, if, you know, some invasive species just came in and ran roughshod over everything, it would destroy the ecosystem. And that's not what we're doing right now, or that's not what we're doing at all. We're coming in and we're helping to improve things, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
Yeah, I'll give you an example, like a perfect example of what you were just talking about, because it is true. And if you have one part of the ecosystem that's missing, it can throw the entire ecosystem kind of off, right? So some years ago, we had really no wet lab space here in Orange County, right? Where if you were a life sciences company and you built to the point where you needed wet lab space, you'd have to make a decision, like pack up and go to Silicon Valley or Los Angeles or some other place, or just find a different way to do that, which is probably not possible all the time. So a group of people, the Beal family, you know, recognized this was a problem, and so they founded University Lab Partners here in Orange County and built hundreds of thousands of square feet of wet lab space, right? So now what we're seeing is life science companies that get formed here, they actually can find all the things they need in the ecosystem here. Before, it was like it was almost like the opening out to the ocean, you know, from the barrier reef. It's like this big, you know, thing in a big aperture in the reef. Well, University Lab Partners closed that. So we hope that, like with RevHub and the NorthSTAR OC collaborative with Cal State Fullerton and the other partners, that we've also just closed off some of those breaches, right? Some of those, and bridged over some of those pain points that, you know, for entrepreneurs that they meet along the journey. Again, route them right toward all the good reasons to fail, right? But let's see if we can't help bridge them over all the bad and horrible reasons to fail.
Right. And I think you and I could probably talk for hours about all the right reasons to fail, or all the normal reasons to fail. And it happens all the time. I mean, I know I told my students, you know, 90+% of startups end up failing, even venture backed ones. I mean, it's just the reality of the business. It's very high risk, but also potentially high reward. And so that's what we're doing here. And, you know, as what you were just talking about having access to resources, it reminds me of all the other entrepreneurial ecosystems that have popped up over the years. I mean, the first one starting up around Stanford, Silicon Valley, back in, what was that, the 70s. And, you know, before that, I mean, it was really hard to start a, you know, kind of like a hyper growth, really quick growing business. So they started getting the funding in there, and all the other resources started following. And we've seen it being built out here in Orange County, Los Angeles County, San Diego, in Austin, Boston, you know, in a number of other places. Boulder comes to mind as well. So yeah, I mean, this isn't something, you know, completely brand new that we're doing here. We're just doing it more for a specific purpose and with a specific mission in mind.
Yeah, and also something you said kind of led me to something I think it's really important with social enterprises too, right? The thing with social enterprises is that, you know, like when we are to the point where we have a venture that's emerged from incubation, it seems like they're both impact and investment ready, you know, that they can go and present to RevFund to actually get funded. I will tell you that our investment committee at RevFund, they will hit on the impact side of this as much as they will hit on being investment ready, right? So for social enterprises, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. And in our incubation, you know, we have to work with the companies to build a viable business model, right? Understand their customers, all the things you do with any kind of enterprise that you're creating, but also work with them on developing theories of change and logic models and impact, you know, evaluation and measurements, those types of things. Because what we don't want to have happen is that these social enterprises become monetarily successful, right? To the point where, hey, someone might even buy them, you know, and acquire them, and then they hollow out the social mission, right? So we need those two things to kind of build and complement each other the whole way. So that's a really special challenge that we have that, you know, say, you know, typical, you know, tech incubator or life science incubator doesn't.
Right. Yeah. So it's different from like a Y Combinator or, you know, like a Techstars or something like that. But maybe you could talk a little bit more about that specifically, because I think when most people are thinking about funding, if they even think about that, they're thinking about, oh, well, here's a check, go and make money. But you're doing a heck of a lot more than that through RevFund and through all the other stuff that we have in the ecosystem. So can you walk people through that process? Okay, so the founders, they come to you with their plan and you guys like it. So what are the next steps after that?
Yeah, so there are different. So one of the things that we've adopted, particularly with the NorthSTAR OC collaborative, right, is we call it the no wrong door approach, right? So the collaborative and the net that we've thrown out that's very wide in the community, we hope will bring in a lot of folks. So, but we want to make sure that if somebody comes to a workshop that, say, Cielo put on, you know, and Cielo, you know, pulls them in and says, hey, you know what, you actually have a scalable, what would be called a social enterprise. I don't think you realize that that's what you're working with here, but your idea, so let's connect you over to RevHub. Or if they come through the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and, you know, they really want to start an Etsy store or a side hustle, they can be, you know, routed right over to Cielo. Right. So we built this no wrong door approach so that once they're inside, we also have on staff, we have navigators. So they're folks who are, you know, they take them up the mountain, you know, so as soon as they get into our ecosystem, no matter where they start, if they start at exploration, right, or if they start at ideation, sometimes they will start at incubation, you know, we'll get them in at that level. But there are navigators at every stage that are helping them go through this. So formally, what is kind of emerging now in the NorthSTAR Collaborative are this outreach and engagement work, this exploration and ideation, then this incubation that leads all the way up to RevFund, you know. So along the way, we have structured programming at every step. And then, you know, by the time we've really kind of tightened up, you know, the criteria to enter the incubator, but even at that stage, we're still providing some non-dilutive funding for projects. So we have now proof of product, proof of concept funding. So in the earliest stages, we can provide micro grants for things like what I mentioned, a $750 license for software, whatever. We can do micro grants at the ideation stage. Sort of at the ideation incubation stage, though, we would pivot to higher value proof of product, proof of concept grant. So somewhere in the $25,000 range to help something move forward, prototyping, those types of things. So all of those resources now are being knitted together. That didn't exist in terms of a social enterprise ecosystem 3 years ago, right? So because of the NorthSTAR partnership and everything, we're piecing all that together now.
Yeah, and that's a great part of the NorthStar partnership is the navigators, because even university students I worked with, I mean, just starting a business, it's complex, it's
Yeah.
complicated. There's so many different resources that are available, and you could spend hours, if not days or weeks, trying to find the right resources, and then you take a wrong turn somewhere and you don't figure it out until months later, and I mean, you've wasted, hours and days and weeks of your
Yeah.
life. So that is huge. So
Well,
I
to
think
that
we're.
point though,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
just real quick, Travis, to that point though, there's also like, that's why the need for domain expertise is really important too, because as they go through, yes, every business is going to have the same questions about, customers and, and supply chains and things like that. But it gets more specific when you start getting into these clusters and verticals like climate action. We have to make sure that we have mentors, both volunteer and paid consultants, domain expertise in blue tech, green tech, clean tech, ag tech, all of these different disciplines. So the same is true in health, right? We need people understanding regulations, FDA approvals. We need like all of these types of things. So in addition to the generalists, we got to build an ecosystem that has that domain expertise specifically for those verticals.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that at Cal State Fullerton we've also worked on for years. I mean, trying to build that community of volunteers and mentors that have that wide range of professional expertise that we can go to when we need somebody with with expertise in IP litigation or protection. Hey, we've got an IP attorney, Justin Sanders, or whatever the case is. So building that in is absolutely huge, and it's more than just navigating any red tape that might be there in Orange County, Los Angeles County, California overall, but it's figuring out all the other stuff that goes into it, all the other pieces of the puzzle that go into building that kind of a social enterprise. So I think we are nearing the end of it. So I always try to end with this. What kind of advice would you have? And I'll maybe make it a little more unique for yourself. So anybody who's a social entrepreneur who has this idea and maybe they were thinking of going the nonprofit route, what advice would you have for them that, hey, actually start a for-profit social enterprise and work with us here in this NorthStar ecosystem?
I think what I would say is understand the topic you're addressing in the landscape that is also addressing it before you go whole hog into founding something new. Because that's probably one of the things that gets most frustrating is, somebody feels very, especially in our space and social entrepreneurship, right? You do it because you feel very passionate about it, right? And it somehow doesn't occur to a lot of people to simply do some Googling and kind of go, hey, is anybody else saving the sea turtles, right? Is somebody else doing this? And how are they doing this? Are they doing this better than the idea that I have? Well, maybe then that's just a volunteer opportunity for me or a career opportunity for me to go work in that space. If you're really, I love the concept that social problems are market failures. The dean of the business school at UCI, Ian Williamson, he talks about it that way. And I think trying to approach it from that perspective, like looking at these social problems. So by the same token of doing your research first and understanding, don't assume that simply because it's a social innovation that it's supposed to be supported by charity, right? There are business models. If you just take a couple of different approaches at it, you might think of, what, I'll give you an example, right? Is there no market for very low income housing for large families? There's a market for it. The market's not meeting the need, right? And so there are people with money who are willing to pay, but they can't pay what rents are currently, right? So there's a niche there. If you have an idea that can like jam into that niche and help to, solve that problem, well, I think you've got yourself a social enterprise there. So I think those are the two things: is understand that area before you go in and think you're going to change the world with your idea. Figure out who else is doing it and what, for lack of a better term, the competitive environment is already out there. And then don't assume that everything's got to be a charitable enterprise, nonprofit. Think a little deeper about what business model might support the intervention or the change that you're trying to seek.
Yeah, I think the phrase that we've used is that a lot of people who think that they have this great idea, they have a solution and they're in search of a problem.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of harsh, but it's also real. I mean, so yeah, do that research up front, figure out what's already going on. You have to really figure out the lay of the land before you actually try to, do anything. And, speaking of low income housing, I mean, we have somebody in our Cal State Fullerton entrepreneurship community who's working on that right now. He's already building, small housing, and has financial backing for it, building it out. He has the land. So yeah, I mean, if you do have an idea for something, if you do see a problem, and I think that's the main thing, right? Find out what the problem is, and then do as much research on it as you possibly can.
Yeah.
That's one way that you can avoid wasting time on trying to build a business or a nonprofit or whatever it is out of it.
Yeah, and I would say, Travis, even more importantly, it avoids what you'd want to avoid, of course, because you care about this issue. If you move into some spaces, I see this, I do a lot of work in homelessness and affordable housing here in Orange County, and I see some people who just parachute right into the middle of the space. They have done nothing to try and understand what's going on, and it actually can be damaging, right? Well, this is not happening, and that is not happening. If you haven't been here, you don't know what the system is like to be coming in and telling us everything that's wrong with it just yet. It happens all the time. I'm sure that folks engaged in climate change, everybody's got an idea about what to do, but I think before you can have some actual sustainable impact, which is what you should want to do, you need to understand clearly what issue you're addressing.
Yeah, it's like, joining the Yankees lineup and thinking that you're going to be an all-star slugger.
Yeah, right. Put no work in, never been in the batting cages, and all of a sudden, you're going to go out and play shortstop.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just from my perspective and my experience on the startup side, yeah, I mean, it definitely helps doing that research. It also helps having experience in there. So if you do see a problem, maybe your first step is the research, and your second step is getting a volunteer position or getting a job.
Yeah.
That has to do with what you see that problem is, and that way you're going to see what more the reality is of the situation, and then if there is a better solution that you could develop, then you're in a much better position to do it. So
yeah, agree.
That's the only addition I can make to that conversation. Tim, it was an extreme pleasure for me getting to do this interview with you, and looking forward to working with you in the future. And is there anything else that you would like to share? Any way that people can reach out?
Yeah, I mean, people can always go to our website at RevHubOC.com, and come visit us if you are looking for a place to invest to really make a difference. Rev Fund can always use investors, but we're also looking for domain experts, mentors, people who want to work with some of our startups, our social enterprise startups, to help them succeed. So if you have an interest, our website even has, I believe it might be brand newly up, a form to fill out if you're interested in being a mentor, an advisor. If you can bring some skill sets to our folks, we're open for business. We're open to partner.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tim. That was a pleasure, and we'll see you around.
Great. Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it.